This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Atelian with tonight's top stories from East Asia. North Korea's Kim Jong-un signals room for dialogue with the U.S. if Washington changes its stance on Pyongyang's nuclear status. But he brands Seoul the most hostile enemy. Also, Washington sees its ties with Beijing as strategically stable. A U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, says that both have realized just how damaging an all-out trade war could be. Also, Germany's Chancellor visits China's AI hub of Hangzhou, seeking fresh business deals, a day after pledging deeper ties with his country's biggest trading partner. And a rare win for Jimmy Lai after a Hong Kong court overturned the jailed media tycoon's fraud conviction, but his 20-year jail sentence for a separate national security charge remains. A Hong Kong stock exchange posts record profits for a second straight year, fueled by a rush of new listings and a surge in trading activity. Also tonight, China zeroes in on its silver economy as its population rapidly ages. Could this be the key to the country's next growth story as traditional sectors slow? North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has signaled room for dialogue with the U.S., even as he slams the door shut on diplomacy with South Korea. Well, Mr. Kim says that Pyongyang could get along with Washington, but only if the U.S. drops its policy of confrontation involving sanctions and military pressure and accepts North Korea's nuclear status. Now, at the same time, he warned the North could, quote, completely destroy the South if Pyongyang were threatened. He said there is absolutely nothing to discuss with what he calls an enemy state. Well, meantime, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung says that Mr. Kim's remarks are regrettable, but insists he will continue efforts to build trust and find common ground to stabilize the situation on the Korean peninsula. Well, Kim Jong-un has set out ambitious military goals for North Korea over the next 5 years at the Workers' Party Congress. He called for expanding the country's nuclear arsenal, accelerating production of warheads, and developing intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of being launched from underwater. Mr. Kim also vowed stronger reconnaissance and electronic warfare capabilities. For more on this, we are joined now by CNA's Grace Shin. So help us understand this, Grace. We've got Kim Jong-un saying that he's going to expand North Korea's nuclear arsenal, but also saying that the U.S. and North Korea could somehow get along. Is this a genuine opening for talks?
Well, I'll tell you, if you listen carefully, this isn't a softening. It's quite conditional. Kim Jong-un is basically saying we can talk, but only if you accept that we are a nuclear state, which effectively removes denuclearization from the table. And that's significant because for years, denuclearization was at least nominally the framework for talks. And now Pyongyang is saying its nuclear status is constitutional and permanent. And we've seen similar negotiating tactics elsewhere. Iran, for instance, negotiates while continuing enrichment. Venezuela engages in dialogue while holding on to leverage. And the pattern is familiar. You consolidate strength first, then negotiate. And North Korea has a long track record of doing just this. Back in 1994, the agreed framework froze parts of its plutonium program in exchange for energy aid. And that deal collapsed in the early 2000s, and Pyongyang resumed nuclear development. The six-party talks in the mid-2000s produced step-by-step commitments, but implementation stalled and testing resumed. Even during the 2018 to 2019 Trump summits, there was no irreversible dismantlement of core nuclear infrastructure. So when Kim Jong-un talks about expanding fissile material production or increasing the number of warheads, AI-enabled attack capabilities, or even submarine launch systems, that's not undermining North Korea's diplomacy. In fact, it's reinforcing leverage before diplomacy. There's also an interesting nuance in the visuals that observers are noting too. At this year's parade marking the closing of the party congress, North Korea emphasized mass personnel and political symbolism rather than displaying strategic weapons like ICBMs or new missile systems. And observers say that's unusual for a major parade, and analysts suggest it may have been deliberate as a way to signal strength and rhetoric while avoiding direct provocation of Washington ahead of President Trump's upcoming trip to China. Trump's visit to China raises the possibility of renewed summit diplomacy, and China has historically played some facilitating role in past engagement cycles, so a second summit could be plausible. Now, if talks do resume, though, observers stress they're far more likely to center on arms control, risk reduction, or a freeze, rather than the total dismantlement of North Korea's nuclear program. So this can't be seen just as moderation, it's more seen as calibrated repositioning from a stronger military baseline.
Right. And Grace, how should we also read into the fact that North Korea, is doubling down against South Korea, but at the same time is leaving the door open to Washington?
Well, over the past 2 years, North Korea has refrained from using language or any gesture suggesting reconciliation with South Korea or let alone reunification. It now treats Seoul as a separate hostile state, calling it the most hostile enemy, reinforcing that ideological shift. And experts say this serves multiple purposes. First, it sidelines South Korea. Now, if the issue becomes purely a U.S.-North Korea confrontation, Seoul would lose its role as an intermediary state, which would elevate Pyongyang's status because it's no longer negotiating through Seoul, but directly with Washington as a nuclear-armed adversary. Second, observers point to this aligning with force posture. North Korea's tactical nuclear weapons and many of its conventional systems are primarily targeted at South Korea, which that rhetoric supports the military doctrine. Lastly, they believe it sends a domestic message. By defining South Korea as hostile, Kim can reinforce his regime's legitimacy through external threat framing. So experts view Kim Jong-un and his regime to be intentionally and strategically isolating Seoul while selectively engaging Washington, which distances the peninsula further from talks of reunification.
So, Grace, I want to touch on another key moment at the Congress. We've got Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong's promotion, and we also see his daughter, Kim Joo-ae's growing visibility. So, in a nutshell, what does it tell us about power and succession?
Kim Yo-jong's promotion to full department director formalizes what has already been reality for a while. She has long managed propaganda, inter-Korean messaging, and high-level diplomacy, including in the Trump summits before. So elevating her within the party's central committee institutionalizes her authority. It signals trust, continuity, and internal stability within the elite. At the same time, Kim's teenage daughter, Kim Joo-ae's visibility has always been in the spotlight. She's appeared at missile launches and now a 5-yearly party Congress parade. And that's considered to be one of the most significant political gatherings and moments in the North regime. Now, experts believe that these are not just symbolic events, they're core regime moments tied directly to nuclear capability and national strength. And placing this teenage daughter beside Kim in that context normalizes the idea of fourth-generation leadership. South Korea's intelligence assesses that she's being groomed internally, but Pyongyang has never formally declared succession plans, but the optics may seem to be deliberate. Now, it doesn't mean the transition is imminent, though. Kim Jong-un remains firmly in control, and there's still unknowns about his other children, but the message is definitely there at the Congress, where nuclear status was repeatedly described as permanent and constitutional. The regime simultaneously showcased institutional loyalty through Kim Yo-jong and the determination to continue the Baekdu bloodline, a key part of the Kim's regime political founding, through the daughter of Kim Joo-ae.
All right, good talking to you. Thanks so much for that report. CNA's Grace Chin. Now, in other news, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says that ties with China have reached a level of, quote, strategic stability, with both sides recognizing that an all-out global trade war will be deeply damaging. Mr. Rubio adds that Washington will continue to raise its concerns with Beijing, including China's dominance in supply chains. But he has vowed to push China on negotiating in a three-way nuclear deal with the U.S. and Russia. Well, the top U.S. diplomat's comments come ahead of a much-anticipated meeting between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping in Beijing. Well, that is expected as early as late March. Mr. Trump had recently announced a 15% global tariff hike, which China says it's closely monitoring and will, in time, decide on countermeasures. We've also got U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer saying that the levies may increase up to 15% for some countries, but economies with existing trade agreements will not face a higher cumulative rate. Mr. Greer also gave assurances that Washington is seeking to maintain levies on Chinese goods and that there is no intention to escalate beyond the rates currently in place. And we spoke to John Fortier from the American Enterprise Institute on whether Donald Trump could be softening his tone towards Beijing.
There is also a sense that President Trump has had a hard line on China, but has also opened the door for the possibility that he will be the one who can cut a deal with a tough adversary. And with this meeting coming up, I think that is some indication that he still wants to hold that door open so he can go in with some strength, but also hopefully come out from his perspective with a good outcome for America. The president will likely have substantial tariffs, and his other point was that many countries have already gone through this negotiation with us, and in some ways reopening the negotiation with more uncertainty might not be in their interest as well. So he was making an argument really to the American people why he's doing this, but also a bit to the world that he still has some powers, and that the status quo and what he's done is probably what's going to last. The president has had a good relationship in the very early days with the Japanese prime minister, new prime minister, and I do think he will want to emphasize American and Japanese friendship. The alliance is at a very strong point. But again, the big point on China is that he both is going to be seen as having a hard line, but to go into those negotiations with the possibility that he might find a deal. The two sides, the two largest economies in the world, who are adversaries in many ways, still may find some sort of deal. And I think he can be friends with Japan and still go in with that prospect that he'll be tough, but ultimately seek a deal that will be good for America, but may also be good for wider Asia.
Well, time now for a short break, but coming up on East Asia tonight, equity markets in South Korea and Japan hit new peaks as an investor fears over disruption from artificial intelligence ease. Plus, global debt surges to a record $348 trillion, the fastest rise since the pandemic, as governments ramp up spending on defense and artificial intelligence.
Well, that's the holiday of it.
When you fly Emirates, your holiday isn't over until your flight is over.
The world's fifth largest nation is growing beyond its ability to sustain its population.
High fertility rate is the biggest challenge to Pakistan's development.
With millions more being born every year, Pakistan's resources and opportunities are running out.
Everywhere there's a water crisis.
We graduated from universities but haven't got any opportunities.
Is Pakistan's demographic dividend turning into disaster? Insight tonight on CNA.
The first thing in the morning as Asia wakes up to a new day. Get up to speed with major events shaping lives in the region and other parts of the world.
Putting things in perspective with eye-opening reports and expert analysis as a new era of global politics breeds power struggles and shifting alliances.
We get to the heart of the matter and take stock of the issues you're invested in with on-the-ground reports and wall-to-wall coverage. Viewing it all from a regional lens because we put Asia first.
CNA Summit 2026 brought together global leaders in Jakarta, marking its first ever edition outside Singapore in Indonesia. Taking place in one of Southeast Asia's most dynamic markets, discussions centered on smart growth in a new era.
This is time for us to have more collaboration among ASEAN countries, not only in terms of trade, but also in investment. There's still untapped potential that we can work together in order to achieve all the goals.
The call for deeper regional partnership set the tone for forward-looking dialogue.
It's a really good decision to do it in Indonesia because Indonesia is a very big country and it's a big market as well.
Smart growth means a balance between profitability and sustainability, managing the efficiency so we can also bring sustainable profit going forward.
Driving conversations that shape tomorrow's growth. The CNA Summit. Brought to you by MediaCorp. Main partner, Singtel. Hello Possibilities.
Hello again. Time for your business news now with Roland Lim. So, Roland, Hong Kong exchanges, they've just posted record profits again, but that's not quite a surprise, is it?
No, not surprising at all. It's the second record year in a row for the exchange, and it's also reclaimed the crown globally for IPO fundraising. A surge in equity trading and a rebound in listings driving Hong Kong Stock Exchange operators' earnings to new highs. Net profit for 2025 increased 36% to $2.3 billion, and for the final 3 months of the year, it's jumped 15% to $555 million. Now, both figures beat market estimates. The result highlighting Hong Kong's edge over other markets as the preferred offshore fundraising hub for Chinese companies, even amid rising tensions between Washington and Beijing. Hong Kong saw 119 listings raise a combined $36.7 billion last year, reclaiming the top global ranking. The IPO market has surged at the start of 2026, with funds raised jumping tenfold from a year ago. A data provider Wind says 24 companies have listed so far this year, and that's up more than 160% from the same period last year, raising a total of $11.4 billion. The exchange operator is processing more than 400 listing applications. HKEX CEO praised the exchange's performance while acknowledging volatility will persist. But she added there is cause for optimism as global investors are adapting to the ongoing uncertainty. Meanwhile, Hong Kong tycoon Li Ka-shing's CK Group is selling its power assets, UK Power Networks, to French utility company Engie for £10.5 billion. That's about $14.2 billion. The conglomerate bought the business for around half that back in 2010. The disposal comes amid intense scrutiny of CK Group's overseas infrastructure, especially its Panama Canal ports, now caught in the crossfire of escalating US-China geopolitical tensions. UK Power Networks distributes electricity across London, the southeast and east of England, serving about 8.5 million customers. CK Infrastructure, Power Assets and CK Asset are selling their combined 100% stake plus shareholder loans. Engie says that the deal will strengthen its position in regulated power networks, still requires shareholder and regulatory approvals, including a UK national security review. The announcement triggered a rally across the CK Group's Hong Kong-listed entities, ending the day. CK Hutchison is up 4.5%, CK Asset up 3%, and Power Assets 3.25%. South Korea's central bank has kept interest rates unchanged and signaled they are likely to stay on hold for the next 6 months, as a boom in chip exports and steady inflation give policymakers more time to assess financial stability risks. The central bank also raised this year's GDP growth forecast to 2% from 1.8% previously, citing stronger than expected chip exports. The Bank of Korea recently signaled a prolonged pause in its easing cycle that began in October of 2024 as it navigates currency market volatility and risks from swelling household debt. It also introduced the Federal Reserve's dot plot style chart for the first time that shows where the policy interest rate would likely be in the next 6 months. The Korean won rose to its strongest level against the dollar since October after the central bank upgraded its growth forecast and signaled a pause. And South Korea's stock market hitting another record high today. The benchmark Kospi closing up 3.67%, I should say, its highest close on record and marking a 6th straight session of gains. For the year so far, the benchmark is up more than 46%. The gains led mainly by chipmaker Samsung as well as SK Hynix, ending the day up 7% and 8% respectively. Automakers also extended the rally, Hyundai Motors rising 6.47%, hitting a fresh record, while sister company Kia Motors rising 5%. And boosting the world's best-performing stock market, the South Korean government has passed a crucial corporate reform bill aimed at improving shareholder returns. It requires firms to cancel newly acquired treasury shares within a year. The law ends a practice that experts say allowed conglomerate owners to maintain control at the expense of minority shareholders. It is the latest step in the government's attempts to tackle poor corporate governance. More market action for you. Shares in Tokyo also marked record gains in early trade, surpassing the 59,000 level for the first time, as investors' fears over disruption from artificial intelligence eased. The benchmark Nikkei 225 ending the session up 0.3% at 58,753 points. That's an all-time closing high. The yen also firmer footing against the greenback as well. The currency hitting a two-week low yesterday after the appointments of pro-stimulus Bank of Japan board members, I should say. Meantime, the boost coming largely from tech stocks. Software testing services firm Shift jumping 14.4%. IT service firms NEC rallying 9.4%. Fujitsu advancing 6%. Now, Toyota setting a new peak for car sales in January, despite costly U.S. tariffs and fierce competition from Chinese rivals. The world's biggest automaker selling some 887,000 units globally last year, representing a 4.7% on-year increase and a record for any January. Now, sales in the US and Europe were the main contributors supporting growth. Units sold there rising 8% and 11% respectively. Toyota also managing to reach the achievement even as global output dipped due to a switch in production for a popular car model. Shares ending the day about 1.5% higher. They also have been getting a boost from a Reuters report saying that the company is eyeing a major unwinding of its shares. Now, Toyota is said to be making plans to sell some $19 billion worth of its shares held by financial institutions. The move could increase Toyota's free float and improve its capital efficiency, potentially supporting the stock over time. It would also represent a key moment in the government's push for large corporations to improve corporate governance and to encourage fair competition. Our global debt has risen almost $29 trillion last year, hitting a new record high of $348 trillion, according to the Institute of International Finance, or IIF. It is the biggest annual increase in global debt burden since the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, global debt accounted for 308% of global GDP, the rise being driven by public spending in advanced economies, on defense, and to a lesser extent, investments in artificial intelligence. Government expenditures accounting for more than $10 trillion of that rise, with the US, China, and the Eurozone responsible for roughly three-quarters of that jump. The IIF warns that global debt will build over the coming years thanks to lower interest rates and higher, lighter regulations, leading to super cycles that will reinforce its momentum. Now, last month, the International Monetary Fund estimated global growth in 2026 to be at about 3.3%. Now, these rates are not strong enough to address rising global debt levels if borrowing continues at the 2025 pace. Now, should borrowing continue at its current levels, the level of debt relative to GDP will continue to climb and likely remain at its historic heights. The world's most valuable company, NVIDIA, gave another bullish quarterly revenue forecast, suggesting that the rapid growth in AI infrastructure remains on course. Now, the outlook eased concerns about a bubble in AI investments. Sarah Al-Khaldi has more on what the earnings tells us about the AI boom.
Yeah, it looks like it's still going strong because NVIDIA says for this quarter it's expecting sales of $78 billion, and that is more than what the market was expecting. It beat on the top and bottom lines. When it comes to revenue, in fact, that jumped 73% on year in the fourth quarter. Net income, that almost doubled from a year ago. And this really shows that the AI race is continuing. We are seeing continued expansion in infrastructure as well as spending on the back of fears of an AI bubble. But we also have to keep in mind that there are risks and challenges to NVIDIA's dominance in the AI chip space, because the likes of AMD and Google, they're also making headway in their own chips. Now, when it comes to China, of course, that was something that we were looking at closely with NVIDIA's earnings. The company said that they're not assuming any sales for their data center chips to China for this first quarter forecast. They did receive licenses from the U.S. government to ship small amounts of the H200 chips to China, but we still have to see if that gains any ground.
And you're up to date with the business news. Natalie.
Thanks for that, Roland. Well, on that note, we're going to go for a short break now. But coming up on East Asia tonight, we're going to take a look at China as it grapples with a rapidly aging population.
As thousands of delegates gather here in Beijing for the annual 2 sessions, healthcare will be one of the key areas that foreign investors will be looking out for, alongside other sectors such as telecommunications and education. Known in Chinese as Liang Hui, the 2 sessions will see policymakers set out plans and policy priorities for the year ahead.
CNA's Tan Si-hui dives into why Beijing believes its silver economy could be the key to a new driver of domestic consumption. Washington and Tehran begin their latest round of talks in Geneva amid the threat of fresh U.S. strikes in Iran following a large-scale military buildup in the region.
The weather brought to you by Nippon Paint.
Washable, anti-mold, durable, strong coverage. Nippon Paint Odorless, Singapore's most popular paint brand.
Tokyo at night is something else.
Wow, it's crazy.
The city feels alive.
Wow, that's cool.
Like you can taste the energy.
Ooh.
It's where traditional meets modern. And every step lights up a new discovery. Tokyo is truly unforgettable.
Hello again, this is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. North Korea's Kim Jong-un signals room for dialogue with the U.S. if Washington changes its stance on Pyongyang's nuclear status. He slams the door shut on diplomacy with South Korea, branding Seoul the most hostile enemy. A U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the U.S. sees its ties with China as strategically stable as anticipation builds for a Trump-Xi summit in Beijing next month. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says that there are challenges Berlin should still need to overcome alongside China, a day after both sides pledged closer ties despite their differences. Well, the German leader is wrapping up a trip today aimed at resetting ties between the world's second and third largest economies. He visited the Chinese tech hub Hangzhou this afternoon, seeking fresh business deals. The Chancellor toured robotics firm Unitree, as well as German company Siemens Energy, accompanied by a large group of entrepreneurs. Early in Beijing, Mr. Merz toured the historical Forbidden City that once served as the home for Chinese emperors. He then also visited the Mercedes-Benz plant in the Chinese capital, where he was given a test drive of its newest sedan by the carmaker's chief executive. Well, Mr. Merz met President Xi Jinping yesterday, with both leaders pledging stronger communication and trust amid turbulent times, despite their differences. The German Chancellor said that the two countries should emphasize the things they have in common and face global challenges together.
你在中国人过年期间访华啊，这也就像是亲朋好友啊串门，这也体现了中德关系的密切和高水平。世界越是变乱交织呢，中德两国也要加强战略沟通，增进战略互信。
Schließlich, wir wollen unsere Partnerschaft weiterentwickeln. Das ist in vielen Bereichen möglich. Wir werden aber natürlich auch unsere Interessen wahren. Das gilt für beide Seiten. Und wir wollen Schwierigkeiten im offenen Gespräch ausräumen, vertraulich behandeln und respektvoll miteinander. Wir tun das in enger Abstimmung mit unseren europäischen Partnern. Ich bin sehr zuversichtlich nach diesem Tag heute. Das ist ein guter Weg für die deutsch-chinesischen Beziehungen auch in den nächsten Monaten und in den nächsten Jahren.
Now, the third round of indirect nuclear talks between the US and Iran, mediated by Oman, have begun in Geneva. Well, the high-stakes negotiations is taking place amid a massive US military buildup in the Middle East, sparking fears that Washington could strike Tehran. Oman's state news agency reported that US and Iranian negotiators showed openness to new and creative ideas and solutions, adding that Iran's proposals, along with US responses and questions about the core elements of Iran's nuclear program, were reviewed during the meeting. The parties also examined the necessary guarantees required to secure an agreement. Now, Oman's foreign minister met with the International Atomic Energy Agency's chief ahead of the talks as part of consultations and exchanging of views on technical matters related to Iran's nuclear dossier, as well as new ideas currently under negotiation between Iran and the US. The IAEA has not commented on the meeting. Prior to the talks, Iran says that it will focus solely on its nuclear program.
موضوع مذاکره همونطور که بارها گفته شده متمرکز هست بر بحث هسته‌ای. مواضع ما روشن هست هم در حوزه رفع تحریم‌ها و هم در رابطه با حقوق و منافع هسته‌ای ایران، استفاده صلح‌آمیز از انرژی هسته‌ای.
Reports say Iran is planning a draft proposal that offers a peaceful nuclear enrichment program for civilian use. Tehran has accused the US of lies and disinformation about its nuclear intentions and has urged diplomacy respecting Iran's dignity. The Americans want the Iranians to give up uranium enrichment altogether. Well, at a meeting, US negotiator Steve Witkoff said that Washington is demanding that any deal struck with Iran should remain indefinitely. Well, the US has piled pressure on Iran ahead of the indirect talks in Geneva. The Treasury Department hit Tehran with new sanctions targeting 30 individuals and companies linked to the country's ballistic missile program, drone production, and illicit oil trade. The sanctions deny those affected access to any property or financial assets held in the U.S. It also stops American firms and citizens from doing business with them. They're largely symbolic because many Iranians do not hold funds in the U.S., but they do relay yet another stern message to Iran to strike a deal on nuclear disarmament. The U.S. has threatened to use military force if Tehran fails to agree. It has amassed a large fleet of planes and warships, including 2 aircraft carriers, near Iran. The buildup is said to be the U.S. military's biggest in the region in decades. Vice President J.D. Vance has urged the Iranians to take the threat of military force seriously. He said that Washington sees evidence Tehran has been rebuilding its nuclear capabilities after last year's strikes.
Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. If they try to rebuild a nuclear weapon, that causes problems for us. And in fact, we've seen evidence that they have tried to do exactly that. So the president sending those negotiators to try to address that problem, as the president has said repeatedly, he wants to address that problem diplomatically, but of course the president has other options as well.
Chinese policymakers are stepping up efforts to boost spending on services at home, part of a bid to turn domestic consumption into a bigger driver of growth. One sector they are turning to is the silver economy amid China's rapidly aging population. Well, CNA's Tan Sihui with this report, part of our week-long deep dive into China ahead of its most important annual meetings, the 2 sessions.
Happier and healthier times before Miss Zhou's father contracted a rare form of cancer affecting a small gland above the kidney. As the 67-year-old's condition deteriorated, Miss Zhou prepared for the worst and turned to palliative care services.
通过2位社工老师的前期沟通，充分的了解生病的历程和背景，还有需要就是我们作为家属的一些诉求。跟我们设计了有家庭仪式的这种交流。
And it was this moment that Miss Zhou was particularly grateful for.
我说对不起，我爱你，就是有生以来第一次说。我觉得这种支持是如果没有社工的帮助，我是启动不了的。
As China's population continues to age, its healthcare needs have become more complex, boosting demand for specialist services such as palliative care. Currently, those above the age of 60 account for about 23% of the total population. By 2035, this group is predicted to reach 30% or more than 400 million. Reports suggest a gap in the palliative care sector, with less than 3% of patients having access. They cite a lack of trained professionals as one of the reasons.
那就深切地感受到，就是我们说进一步变得专业化，然后能够很有能力的去应对、去帮助患者的，在这一块上的，我们说再往上走的话，其实是有难度的，因为中国大陆目前还没有缓和医疗的这个学科。 所以我们还没有在国内系统学习这个学科的机会。
Amid the growing pressure, Dr. Qin's employer, Beijing Haidian Hospital, tapped Singapore's Tan Tock Seng Hospital and philanthropic organization Lian Foundation through a 3-year program, under which more than 1,000 Chinese healthcare professionals from at least 18 medical institutions will be trained through on-site and online workshops, which includes areas such as symptom relief and therapeutics.
They are looking at our sharing as a platform whereby they can learn what regional standards or Singapore's, how we do it in Singapore. And then they will then have to adopt what they can that's aligned with their cultural context, their laws, their ethics and financing structure.
In the wake of rapid aging, Chinese officials have signaled the country is ready to further open up its healthcare sector to foreign investors.
Both policymakers and investors are also being taken aback by such a sort of explosive growth of the Chinese demographics. China has now a far larger aged population than before, so therefore they need a type of strategic adjustment as to understand such a reality. Senior homes now to the tomb yard. So there is a large potential that needs to be further tapped.
That's why, as thousands of delegates gather here in Beijing for the annual 2 sessions, healthcare will be one of the key areas that foreign investors will be looking out for, alongside other sectors such as telecommunications and education. Known in Chinese as Liang Hui, the 2 sessions will see policymakers set out plans and policy priorities for the year ahead. China's per capita healthcare spending reached about 2,500 yuan, or roughly $360 last year. This compares with nearly $6,000 per capita in OECD countries in 2024, highlighting substantial headroom for growth and investment in China's healthcare market.
For more on China's shifting economy, let's bring in CNA's Tan Sihui, joining us live from Beijing. So, Sihui, first up, perhaps you could walk us through some of the broader domestic consumption challenges that still exist in China.
Well, currently, China's household consumption rate stands at about 40%. That's far below the OECD average of around 54%. Now, when we look at the household savings, it is also high at about 40%. And when we think about savings rate, there's an assumption that there will be high spending rate and high purchasing power. But when we look at the savings this time around, nowadays, the Chinese are having precautionary savings because there is a growing fear of unemployment, also low income. And so there is this general sense of pessimism when it comes to spending during this period. And I've also spoken to some youths. They say they used to spend a lot during online sales like 11/11, but this time around, they don't have that urge and they have that kind of pessimism that is surrounding them. Another reason also is also the household debt that is linked to mortgage loans as well through a struggling property sector. That used to account for about a quarter of China's economy. And so the Chinese government is clearly very aware of these challenges. We've seen a notable shift in the tone by the Chinese government. It used to be 提振消费, which is to boost consumption. Now it is 大力提振消费, which is to vigorously boost consumption. And at last year's Central Economic Work Conference, we heard from the Chinese officials that the boosting of domestic consumption will be the top economic priority of 2026.
So, quite a number of challenges you've mentioned there. Then what are some of the measures we can expect China to adopt to address these problems?
I mean, there are reports that suggest that there could be discussions of a specific consumption growth target. That's especially since the Chinese government is going to announce the new 15th five-year plan that charts the economic as well as social growth plan for the 5 years ahead. But of course, this has not been confirmed. Analysts say that there could be announcements of policies that are similar to what we've heard before. We understand that they're likely to going to incentivize the private sector to cater to the services sector, just as what you've heard in my story earlier. There is a shift away from catering to goods, especially since the services sector is more elastic than the goods sector. That's also a dilemma, especially when we see the trade-in scheme. We've seen 2.6 trillion yuan of sales last year from the trade-in scheme, but analysts are saying, they're not going to expect Chinese people to buy 10 television sets or to trade in their car when it's only being used for 3 years. And so there is a dilemma, especially when they're going to renew this trade-in scheme. And so they're likely to look at specific sectors. Now, analysts are also saying that there's likely going to be a broader look at how they can introduce certain policies for the economy.
But right now, both investors and also the government have seen that only by providing a better job security and also the space for high earning, they can really generate consumption. So therefore, employment is definitely going to be the major focus, and also the quality of such sort of employment.
Analysts are also saying that the Chinese government is also likely to look at the fiscal budget and how it's going to target certain sectors like the green and digital economy. Also, education will come in for the policy announcements. They're likely going to retool, reskill manpower to be able to cater to these certain sectors. Also, there's also going to be a wider welcome for global investments to the Chinese economy.
Many thanks for that report. CNA's Tan Si-hui live from Beijing. Well, coming up next on East Asia tonight, China's soft power getting a new face. Not the usual panda, but the golden snub-nosed monkey. How will these ambassadors compare against their black and white counterparts? And Samsung unveils its latest smartphones with a new feature aimed at protecting users from shoulder surfers.
Hello.
Someone special.
Babe, 99.
Someone who dresses in like very expressive colors.
I need you to not be a yes man to me.
What does it mean to have an AI companion?
What do you think?
Getting some background vocals could elevate the song.
There's pizza. I think you love pizza.
I'm also in the mood for something new. How about we try the steaks and fries instead?
The engagement is so realistic.
The whole point of this is to really mimic a human.
Do you want to take a Wi-Fi together in the bubble?
What's going on? Can't quite figure out what's happening around us tonight.
Don't say anything, just watch the movie.
AI companions are essentially designer buddies.
Well, in this show, let's see how the AI companions work and why they sometimes beat humans at being human.
Witness stories of resilience and ambition unfold across Asia this March on CNA. In Singapore, 5 food entrepreneurs confront the true cost of survival in a relentless F&B scene.
And you see your bank account kind of dwindling down, and I've got 2 young kids. It's a scary feeling.
Faced with daily operational pressures, how far would they go to chase a dream in the long game? In November 2025, a catastrophic fire in Hong Kong killed more than 100 residents. Even as homes and hopes were destroyed, survivors came together to reclaim their lives. Witness a community rising from the ashes of loss in After the Fire. And enter the arena of innovation as 36 participants overcome a series of challenges to design, build and pilot drones and robots.
Come on!
Who will be crowned champions of the very first CNA Tech Challenge. This March on CNA. Saturday on Japan Hour. When you cycle around Hokkaido, you got to eat the amazing seafood. Enjoy the wonderful onsen.
Smell the minerals and the ion. This is what Japan is all about.
And meet the indigenous people of Hokkaido, the Ainus.
Yay! Nice to meet you.
Japan Hour, Saturday on CNA.
Japan Hour is brought to you by Sumitomo Corporation. MUFG, committed to empowering a brighter future. Zip Air, no fuel surcharge from 216 Singapore dollars. And IHI.
Hong Kong's Court of Appeal has overturned the 2022 fraud conviction against Jimmy Lai, a rare legal victory for the pro-democracy media tycoon. Well, Lai remains behind bars on a separate national security charge, sentencing him to 20 years in jail. The 78-year-old founder of the now-defunct newspaper Apple Daily did not appear in court. The publication was at the heart of Lai's fraud trial. Prosecutors argued that he had breached lease terms by allowing his private consultancy firm to operate in office space that Apple Daily had rented. The court said that the prosecution failed to prove that Lai made the false representation as alleged. Well, it remains unclear how Thursday's outcome affects Lai's overall prison sentence. Earlier this month, Lai was sentenced to 20 years on collusion charges under a Beijing-imposed national security law. He had been detained since 2020 following a crackdown that followed pro-democracy protests the year before. The case has attracted international scrutiny, with both the US and UK calling for the release of Lai, who is a British citizen. China, however, maintains that Lai is a Chinese citizen. Also on the national security front, a Hong Kong court has sentenced the father of wanted US-based activist Anna Kwok to 8 months in prison. Kwok In-sung has been found guilty of attempting to withdraw funds from his self-exiled daughter's insurance policy. Authorities had earlier placed a $128,000 bounty for Anna Kwok's arrest and later banned anyone from handling any funds for her. She's among the nearly 3 dozen overseas activists wanted by the city's national security police. Samsung has unveiled its latest generation flagship Galaxy smartphones. Well, the lineup features a privacy display engineered for a shoulder-surfing world, while also seeking to address rising consumer concerns around data security. Iris Spitzer attended Samsung's event in San Francisco and files this report for CNA.
And the world's first built-in privacy display.
Cheers from the crowd in San Francisco as Samsung unveiled the new S26 line of Galaxy smartphones. Its premium model, the Galaxy S26 Ultra, introducing a built-in privacy display that limits how much of the screen can be seen from the side.
The ability to use that somewhere like on the subway or the airplane in an elevator, I think that's a really great feature that's really innovative, and I'm pretty sure like all phone manufacturers are probably going to start using that in the future.
Samsung says the feature works at the hardware level, adjusting individual pixels so the screen is visible for the person holding the phone while appearing dark from sharper angles. Samsung hopes the new privacy display on this smartphone, the S26 Ultra, will give it a boost in the ultra-competitive smartphone market. Last year, Apple overtook the South Korean company as the world's biggest smartphone seller, and both firms are facing pressure from lower-cost Chinese rivals. Analysts say those Chinese competitors have gained ground by offering strong performance at significantly lower prices. The Galaxy S26 Ultra will retail for almost $1,300 in the U.S.
They are actually getting better each year, and it's not a big trade-off. Usually it's the cameras or some premium features, but the users that just don't need those are happy to pay like a third of the price for a cheaper model. And Chinese have another thing going for them. Now they are at least one battery generation ahead of Samsung and Apple.
Samsung is also leaning heavily into artificial intelligence, introducing new software designed to work across multiple apps and digital assistants.
Integration with different agents, so it's not one ecosystem, it's paired with other ecosystems as well.
Samsung also unveiled updated Galaxy Buds wireless earbuds and a range of AI features designed to anticipate users' needs, from managing schedules to helping complete everyday tasks automatically. The company is hoping smarter software and stronger privacy protections will help convince consumers it's time to upgrade. Iris Spitzer, CNA, San Francisco.
Panda diplomacy. Well, it's helped to revive the captive population of the giant panda, lifting the species from endangered to vulnerable. Now there might be another candidate in line to play diplomat, the golden snub-nosed monkey. William Denslow files this report from Brugelet, Belgium.
Transported from the mountains of central China to international stardom, Belgian Zoo Paradiser is hosting 3 special guests: Liu Yun, Lulu and Juen Juen. The zoo sees them as ideal ambassadors in bridging cultural gaps.
This is part of my objective in the mid or long term, to use the easiness of beauty to tell something which is more sophisticated, which is crucial if you want to bring people closer to each other.
But there is another underlying purpose in having them here. They're part of a 10-year conservation loan program from China.
These monkeys may only be on loan here for a decade, but there are hopes that their stay can have a lasting impact, opening up new possibilities for conservation efforts.
The hope is that monkey diplomacy might do for these guys what panda diplomacy did for these guys. Xing Hui arrived here at the Paradise Zoo in 2014, part of China's decades-long panda diplomacy. The international program has helped to fund research, breeding projects and habitat conservation back home.
The successes of some of the other types of conservation programs in terms of the growth of protected areas has been really the result of an integration of a lot of forces, both things that have happened in China, things that were rooted and started in China, as well as partnerships that have grown internationally.
In 2016, the giant panda's endangered status was downgraded to vulnerable. Since then, captive populations have nearly doubled. But pandas have been famous for a long time, and creating the same level of buzz for the lesser-known monkey would be very different. That's why this diplomatic stint opens the possibility that support for panda conservation efforts can benefit them too.
The funds that are generated often help other species in their range. And so, for instance, money that goes to preserve the panda habitat preserves the habitat for all of the animals that live there. And that has included the golden-haired snub-nosed monkey, for instance.
Paradise in Belgium is only one of 2 locations outside Asia where the monkey is being hosted. The Zoo Parc de Beauval in France was the first to receive them last year. But for a species that doesn't have the same brand recognition as the giant panda, nor carry the same political weight, their Europe debut's already drawing crowds and winning hearts. For CNA, I'm William Denslow in Brugelet, West Belgium.
Elsewhere, more than 30 Japanese men, clad only in loincloths, brave the cold and heavy rain to take part in a harvest festival more than 2 centuries old. Held at a small, muddy field in a residential pocket outside of Tokyo, the men formed human pyramids, charged and threw one another into the mud in tussles to offer prayers for a bountiful harvest. Organizers say the ritual dates all the way back to a time when the area was surrounded by farmland and rice fields, with villagers wrestling on horses in the paddies.
雨ね、今年は雨がなかったのに今日だけ雨がいっぱい降って、恵みの雨っていうことでいいんじゃないですかね。水は意外と暖かかったです。風が冷たかったです。
Well, on that note, we wrap up Thursday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. Thanks for watching.